if the planet is being destroyed, we shouldn't rob ourselves of laughter in the process when we're trying to fix it, because that means we have to be, sad when the world ends and sad throughout the process. So I'm going to be happy and joyful until we reach that final moment.
Welcome to the Humourology podcast with me, Paul Barros. This is where we explore the art of humour in business and life. My guest today is an award-winning environmentalist, writer and global speaker whose work sits at the intersection of politics, nature, culture and human psychology. She's been recognised with the Medal of the Order of Australia, named in Forbes 30 Under 30, served as a United Nations Young Champion of the Earth finalist, and now advises global initiatives on biodiversity and conservation. Her new book, Nature's Last Dance, explores one of the most serious challenges humanity has ever faced, yet does so with curiosity, storytelling, and a surprising sense of humour. Natalie Kyriacou, welcome to the Humourology podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. I love the book and we will get onto it in a little while. But I wanted a little bit more about you and your background. Let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up and what were those early years like, emotionally and intellectually? But probably most importantly for the Humourology podcast, was humour valued in your family?
It absolutely was. I grew up in Melbourne, Victoria, in Australia, and my early life was filled with lots of books, lots of nature, and lots of laughter. I still think my family are the funniest people I've ever met. So there was a big dose of humour.
And well, I can kind of see that already just through meeting you, but also the book deals with that because environmental work can be very heavy emotionally. Do you remember the first moment when you realized humor could help you process serious issues without, if you like, becoming overwhelmed?
Environmentalists, as we often sit in rooms and yell at each other that climate change is a catastrophe and how bad it is. And that can be quite tiring and quite depressing. So you need to find something to laugh about. And I thought it's not working anymore where we're shouting about how bad climate change is, which it is, and we're shouting about how bad nature destruction it is, which it is. But we need to find new ways to engage people because they're getting a little bit sick of how we're depressing everybody. And so I thought, well, that's a good time to lean on storytelling and humor and stories of wonder. Otherwise, I think we're not going to get very far if we keep focusing on doom um, and making everybody miserable. It's not a good tact.
Well, I agree, and having read the book, I wholly agree. It would seem to me, and this is looking from the outside, that many people working in activism, like you said, start from anger or fear. But you seem to start from the other end of the spectrum, sort of curiosity and wit. Where do you think that psychological framing came from? I mean, was it your family?
Well, I didn't start off that way because I remember I spent, in my early years, I worked in the Bornean jungle for a while and I was working with orangutans. And I remember spending months there and then coming back to Australia and I was outraged about just the destruction of nature. I was outraged by the palm oil industry and I had a belly full of rage and I was ready to let anybody hear it. And I remember my dad was sitting around the dinner table and my dad asked me if I wanted ice cream. And I said, how dare you even ask me if I want ice cream? Of course I don't want ice cream. It's killing orangutans and the palm oil in it. And so I was intolerable. It's like that phase that I feel like a lot of environmentalists or a lot of people go through, even people that are potentially thinking about joining a cult. It's this sort of mentality of nobody, like I've been awakened and I've been enlightened and nobody else understands. So I'm going to yell at them until they understand. And so I did go through that phase and I learned pretty quickly that it didn't work well for me. And so I thought I'd lean on the next best thing, which is what my family celebrates a little bit more. It is gratitude and joy and wonder and humor, and of course, not overlooking the seriousness of the issues of the world, but tempering them a little bit with a sense of humor.
Has anybody sort of like commented on that you're coming at it from a different angle? What I'm really asking is does the community, or as you mentioned the word cult because it can be sometimes a little bit cultish, does some people in the community go, well, you're not taking this problem seriously enough?
No, no, they haven't. It's had a really good response, and I think that we're so desperate. I mean, we are in the environmental community. We're so desperate that anything that is going to shift the dial on this or help people care, I think people will get behind. And you know, my peers that have read the book, they know what I'm trying to achieve. They know that I'm not making light of the situation, but just offering levity to be able to cut through to new people. So it's actually had a really positive response. And I think most environmentalists, they're sick of the doom and gloom as well. It's just they know we all need to experiment with different things and see what works. So, I mean, so far so good.
A lot of people can be put off by what I would call the po-faced nature of some of these things because it can be difficult to, we all know, or those of us thinking people know that it is a very important problem, but if you can find a new way in, levity doesn't have to mean you treat it lightly, does it?
No, no, of course not. I mean, I think you can joke about most things. It doesn't take away from the seriousness. It's a way that we cope with things. I think that regardless of what is happening in someone's life, regardless of circumstances, there is always an opportunity to laugh or to smile. Um, it is a coping mechanism, but also it's joy. I don't think, you know, if the planet is being destroyed, we shouldn't rob ourselves of laughter in the process when we're trying to fix it, because that means we have to be, you know, sad when the world ends and sad throughout the process. So I'm going to be happy and joyful until we reach that final moment.
Well, and also I would have thought that, I mean, you know, your joy lights up a room when you go into it. I can see that. But also, in order to take people on a journey, because a lot of people who watch this show and listen to this show are leaders, surely, in order to take people on a journey, a leader has to lead with some kind of lightness and levity and laughter.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's satire helps shine a light on, I think, the absurdity of humans. You know, even in the book, I sort of say it is just, I mean, it's such a curious position to be in to have to make the case that we should really protect the very thing that keeps us alive. Like this is, I mean, humans have made the matter of our own survival and our own clean air a thing that has caused endless controversy. And that is absurd and a little bit funny. Like how, I mean, our stupidity is hilarious. And so I do think satire helps make clear the absurdity of humanity's relationship with nature.
Well, I think you're 100% right. And in a sense, what you're doing is pricking the bubble of pomposity, isn't it? Of you know, we can be po-faced, we can be pompous about all this stuff. It is important, but
Yeah.
we can treat it lightly.
Yeah. And having a little bit of humility or self-deprecation and recognizing that, you know, as environmentalists, there is something and we can poke fun at ourselves. There is something really earnest about our approach or that can be laughed at, or we can, you know, we can make fun of ourselves. I think, and it's similar with bird watchers. I mean, I have this chapter in my book about bird watchers, and I think bird watchers it's like a subset of humanity that everybody admires but also makes fun of and doesn't really understand. There's a real eccentricity in bird watching. And so I have this chapter it's a tribute to bird watchers who I see as one of the great joys of the world, but it was also making fun of them a little bit because it's fun to make fun of bird watchers. So I do think I think we can afford to lighten up a little bit when we tackle deep and dark subjects.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I have to say, and I really, really enjoyed it because, I haven't read a lot of environmental books, but this Nature's Last Dance was what had, and it sounds awful to say it was an easy read, but having written several books myself, I always think that's a compliment to the author.
Yeah,
That
thank you.
you can get immersed in it and get and taken along. The book suggests that saving nature may sort of require not just better science, but better storytelling and perhaps even better jokes. Is that the basis of where you're coming from?
Absolutely. We have an incredible range of scientists who have been communicating the science to us, which is incredibly, incredibly important. But we need storytellers to help convey those messages in ways that can appeal to diverse ranges of people. I mean, if I start talking to my grandmother who grew up in a small village in Cyprus about climate change, she's not going to care about the data. I start telling her that it impacts, her wine or her olive oil, then she cares. And so I think we need to be better at storytelling, and that requires more empathy, and that requires leaning on the full breadth of human emotion, which is joy and tragedy and humor and wonder and all of these things to tell stories and connect with other people. So I think it's not science isn't enough. We need the storytelling as humans have lent leaned on storytelling for time immemorial. So I think I'd like to recapture that, and I think there are thousands and thousands of stories around the world that we just need to keep helping them multiply.
I couldn't agree more because I think stories are one of those things. All our ancestors, wherever they were from, didn't have, books or the internet or anything. They had one way of keeping the history of the tribe going, and that was by telling fascinating stories. And what your book is doing, what Nature's Last Dance is doing, is creating stories that will live in people's minds. I mean, I loved the thing, and maybe you can tell us more about it. You wrote about the flightless bird that romances rocks. You know, I didn't know how else to say that basically, but it was trying to shag everything.
Yeah. Yeah, you said it well.
um, at what point did you realize? Well, tell us a bit about that story, but realize that nature is not only beautiful and brutal, but also gloriously ridiculous.
Nature is it is so absurd. And I think it's actually because I've worked in this space for so long, I have conversations with people who are so the focus of their work is so niche and strange, but they don't think it's niche or strange, and so they communicate it really earnestly. Like I would talk to somebody and they would be talking about how, somebody dropped a can of elephant semen because they were doing this, there was this that they were trying to fertilize, go through this fertilization process, and someone was crying over spilt elephant semen, and I thought these are workplace conversations, and these people don't think that's weird. And I love the earnestness of it. And so I think it's being exposed to these people who, from an outside perspective, have the most absurd jobs with absurd animals, and they don't see it. And I'm like, no, we need to be communicating this. But one of my favorite stories is, of course, is the kakapo. So the kakapo is the world's heaviest parrot from New Zealand, and it's also flightless and critically endangered. So there's around 250 left in the wild, and they are besieged with all sorts of issues. One of which is that they have reproductive issues because the male kakapoors they waddle up a hill together and then they start bellowing into the dirt, and that's their mating call. So they're hoping that the females will be irresistibly drawn to their mating call, but unfortunately the females are not interested in that particular brand of male romance. So and the females will only mate with the males if the fruit of their favorite tree is in bloom, which it rarely is. And so Anyway, it means that all of these male kakapoos are left alone, bellowing into the dirt with, not a female in sight. And so they've unfortunately taken to mating with other things. At times, they've mated with other species of bird, which is quite disastrous because they're quite a heavy parrot. So when they mate with a smaller bird, it can cause a lot of injury. But most famously, there was a BBC documentary, and the kakapo started mating with the cameraman's head. And I think that it went viral on YouTube. So this YouTube clip was called "Shagged by a Rare Parrot," and it said something like the subtitle was "Imagine being sexually harassed by the world's heaviest parrot," or something like it. It went absolutely viral. Um, and so because of that, there was a scientist called Kate McGuinness, and she thought, okay, well, if the kakapo wants a human head, then I will deliver a human head for the kakapo. And so she wanted to help the kakapo breed, and she was a New Zealander. So she went to the store, she got a rugby helmet, and then she remodeled the rugby helmet into an ejaculation helmet, which was essentially a hat full of condoms. And her thinking was that she would venture out into the forest and she would wait for a kakapo to come and mate with her head, given they've already shown an interest in doing so. And so she said that for 3 nights in a row, she was standing out in the forest while the world's heaviest flightless parrot humped her head. And she said what she didn't factor in was they are in fact the world's heaviest parrot, and they also they mate for a very long time, longer than most other birds, so for over an hour. And she said having the world's heaviest parrot mate with her head for hours on end was particularly grueling. And unfortunately, it didn't work. Not a drop of semen was produced. So now the helmet is kept in the local museum.
Oh, I'm sorry, but I was going for the gag of like, that's the ultimate head fuck.
It absolutely is. And that is why I love being an environmentalist, because these are the sorts of people that I get to meet. They are doing, it is like the the heroism of the lengths you will go to protect a species, but also the comedy of it. It is just there is something so humble about it.
It's just brilliant because even in those few sentences, I'm like going, this is just wild stuff. And when you read the book, you get all those sort of things. And I was thinking, well, are suddenly environmentalists going to be saying things like, there's no use crying over spilt elephant semen?
Yes. So it must be a common saying among environmentalists.
It's like, it's brilliant. But in order to bring people in, I mean, I could go through loads of the stories in the book, and you can share all of them because I love them all of them. But the one that really stayed with me was the escaped hippos. And where I didn't expect it to go was who were imported by Pablo Escobar.
Yes.
I mean, on one level, it's almost sort of surreal and darkly comic, but it also kind of illustrates how individual acts of power or ego can create environmental consequences that last for generations. Could you just tell us a little bit more about that? So you know the story better than me, but I loved the story. It's
Yeah.
extraordinary.
Well, Pablo Escobar, as we know, he was very successful at running the world's largest drug trafficking empire. But his side hobby was that he had a personal zoo. And in his zoo, he had imported all sorts of animals from all over the world, kangaroos, and one of them was a hippo. So he'd imported 4 hippos, which, as you know, they should be in Africa. Um, and then when Pablo Escobar was shot dead by the authorities, he left behind his zoo. Unfortunately, the vets and the authorities were unable to remove the hippos. Hippos are one of the world's most dangerous animals, very difficult to approach, and so they didn't know what to do with the hippos. The hippos ended up absconding to a nearby river. And then over the years, they multiplied. And so now there are hundreds of hippos spread throughout Colombia. And they have caused all sorts of problems, one of which is that there are many scientists that feel they are causing widespread environmental destruction. And that is largely because their poo upsets the balance in the ecosystems. Two, they've become a little bit of like a social and cultural phenomenon. So there's statues of the hippos. People really love the hippos, but at the same time, they're a political nightmare. And so then the government tried to hunt them, and that caused problems. So then there were protests. And so it's this, I highlight that story because what started as four hippos has become a social, political, scientific, and cultural phenomenon throughout Colombia with, debates waging on all sides. And it's cost the government a huge amount of money. And so it's quite an interesting story about how humans in their hubris and we were known for making a whole range of terrible decisions, but one small decision or one seemingly small decision can set off a whole host of ecological, political, and social problems in the form of a hippo.
Oh, yeah. Well, but I think that's at the core of one of the big messages of the book, and ultimately, I think a very important message about the human tendency to think short term while ecosystems need and respond to long term decisions.
We are really, really poor decision makers, and all of our systems, our economic systems, our political systems, even the way our cultural systems, it's very short-term thinking. We do not, and it's interesting because for a species that we talk about reproducing and about future generations, none of our systems are actually in place to protect young people and future generations and future environments. It's all short-term election cycles, short-term investment cycles. Everything is short-term, but we need to be thinking more long-term. That's what the planet needs, and it does a greater service to young people and future generations too.
But how do we implement that? What, because there's got to be some carrot and some stick in this as well, I would have thought. I mean, as a psychologist, I'm always like thinking, what's in it for the politicians to think long term? I mean, and the easy answer is their children and their grandchildren's lives. But
Yeah.
I think they don't think in those terms. How do we, maybe by using humor, actually stick it in their minds that, this is going to have consequences? And maybe it's even, you mentioned the financial consequences were huge. Now,
Yeah.
is that something that they're more likely to respond to?
Yeah. So there are so many, and it depends on the audience. So, I mean, politicians like so. What I would like to see is an upheaval of all of our systems. I don't think that our economic systems or our political systems are fit for purpose. I don't think the economy works for the majority of people, and it certainly doesn't work for the planet. But trying to convince people of that, it's not, you would think it would be as simple as saying, breathe. This is the thing that allows us to breathe, and breathing is good for people. And so we should do that. But no, that does not work. What does work is money. So I like to tell stories, one of which is about the vulture. So in India, for example, India had a strong, healthy population of vultures, and vultures are nature's cleanup crew. So their job is, to eat the dead. Anyway, in the 90s, vultures started dying, and so they numbered in the hundreds of thousands, and their numbers dwindled to just a few left. I think their population declined by about 99%, and nobody could figure out why until they realized that it was vets had been giving this drug to livestock, and then when vultures were eating the livestock, that particular drug was killing them. And so the Indian government quickly banned that drug, and vets complied and they stopped using that drug. But a lot of damage had already been done. All of the vultures had been wiped out, and the cost was immense. It cost the Indian government $350 billion to the economy, and 500,000 people died. And that is because vultures are nature's cleanup crew, which means they can stop the spread of disease. And so without vultures, you are having a buildup of the dead, increased diseases spread. So it's an example to show actually we have everything that we need. Our planet is perfectly balanced so that we have species who perform vital functions. And if we eradicate their homes and we eradicate them, then they can no longer provide those services. Our Mars Incorporated, billion-dollar purveyor of chocolates, their entire profits are built off the back of one tiny little insect called the midge, which pollinates the cacao plant. Without them, we don't have chocolate. And so it's trying to make the case that our economies and our businesses do not exist without nature.
God, oh, that's well. You see, already, That's probably where the headlines come, isn't it? No midge, no chocolate. People
Yes.
will panic about not having chocolate more than they will about not having clean air to breathe.
Yes, I know. It's it is ridiculous. Yeah. The chocolate.
Well, but it isn't it. It is ridiculous, but as a psychologist and as a storyteller, I'm thinking we just need to go for the hot button, don't we? About what is it that moves the needle for people? And if you have to go, do you like chocolate? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, guess what? And I think,
Yeah.
but with politicians, is it not the same you were talking about? Do you like money? All
Yes.
politicians like money. Do you want the country to be prosperous? Well, guess what? Unless you're on
Yeah.
board with this stuff,
Yeah.
you might as well be, burning money in your stove.
Yes, yeah, exactly right. And so that's why people have started to talk about, I mean, even economists are talking about nature as an asset. And whether or not you agree with it, it's finding the language that works for different people. How can nature win politicians' votes? How can nature put money in your pockets? That's sort of the language that's being used at the moment.
My late father was an economist, and I just think, well, actually, that is probably the marriage you have to make at this point, so people see one resulting the other and suddenly wake up. I was going to ask what you would think. Are environmental crises really communication crises?
I think so. I think so. I think that we haven't always been. Do you know what? It's a communication crisis, but the forces that environmentalists have been up against have been a real challenge. So, um, if we think about who benefits from environmental destruction, it is a lot of these. I mean, it's industrial revolution era businesses, like fossil fuel companies, who, by the way, played an incredibly important role in society. But then, one day, a lot of fossil fuel workers woke up and found out they were widely unpopular and it wasn't good for the planet. And so now there's been this tension between environmentalists and fossil fuel companies. But these fossil fuel companies are incredibly powerful because they built the modern economy. Um, Trying to say to them, no, you need to have less of a role in the future is quite difficult. So what they've done is belittled environmentalists or started creating these widespread misinformation campaigns and communication campaigns that branded as environmentalists as divorced from reality. It was particularly divorced from economic reality, and that's done lasting damage. So I think it's not just that environmentalists perhaps didn't have the best communications campaigns, it's also that opposition to environmentalists had very, very good communications campaigns. It was very easy to brand environmentalists as irrational.
I, I would agree, and I think that's because from a psychological perspective, it's about emotion, isn't it? About capturing the emotion, and I was thinking, is saving nature partly about learning how to hold an audience emotionally?
Yes, yeah. And because and it's preying on fear. So a lot of the campaigns you'll see that promote fossil fuels are against climate and nature action, they talk about how this is going to be a tax on you. It's going to, environmentalists are wanting to basically steal your wallet. They're wanting to harm your children. They don't care about your children's future. And so it's very fear based, and it's hard to once that fear infiltrates, it's very hard to come up against it, and so environmentalists, they respond by with their science, and that they'll talk about carbon emissions and planetary boundaries, and that's not as sexy as talking about, your children's future and your bank and tax and, being a tax on you. So, the responses haven't been great from environmentalists. We sort of tend to just yell and then spit out sort of data points, which doesn't endear people to us.
Yeah, and you have to take people with you, which is why I think the Nature's Last Dance and you personally are so powerful, because I think humor, pointing out the absurdity, and storytelling is taking people on an emotional journey, which if we want anybody to care about anything, they need to care emotionally. It's the Maya Angelou line: is people won't remember what they saw, what they heard. They'll remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
And that weirdly, this book feels as much about humanity as it does about wildlife. Uh, what have you personally learned about human nature while writing about just nature?
I think that I wrote this book, and towards the end, when I was editing the book, I wrote it in the backdrop of some serious changes that were happening in the world. Elections of new leaders, some pretty geopolitical instability, and so it was hard to feel hopeful at times. But what I think and what I've learned is that most people are good. Most people, despite what we see in the news, most people, they care about their neighbors, they care about their children, they want to live an honest life. They just want to make sure they can provide for their families. And so I think there is a lot of fear. I think the world isn't working for a lot of people. I think that, as I mentioned, our economic systems and political systems are creating a lot of hardship. And, at times people have blamed one another rather than challenge those very systems. And I think our focus is largely on what divides us, but there is so much that actually unites us. We often come to different conclusions. So I think we can all, we all agree that there is these immense challenges in the world and that life is really hard for a lot of people. But the reason for that, we might place blame on different people or different groups. So I do think that for the most part, people are good, and that you step outside and you talk to people and you think, oh, they're not as crazy as they seem online. They're actually quite nice.
Well, and isn't that one of the big issues? Is people aren't meeting people face to face. They're this whole. You just said the word online, and if you looked at sort of a Twitter feed or X feed or whatever it is now, and you just go, people are crazy,
Yeah.
and they're not, because wherever you go in the world and whoever you meet, and you went to Borneo and I've been all over the world, people are fundamentally the same. They're fundamentally good, and I
Yeah.
think maybe there's this distortion that's
Yeah.
happened when people are now going, all people are bad. In this country they're bad, in this country, and that's not people.
No.
Ultimately, people. But isn't that what's happened? Is we've been dragged apart so
Yeah.
that individual interests can take precedence rather than the interests of humanity as a whole.
Yes. And these platforms that we use as well, these online platforms, how they make money is by dealing in outrage. And so they will profile the most outrageous voices, the most divisive voices. They want to get a feeling or emotion and anger out of people. And so that's why, now as humans, we spend most of our time yelling at each other over the comments section of social media, which to me is mad, just mad. We need to just go outside more.
Well, go outside more, and we have a pub culture in the UK. You have one in Oz as well. And if I go to my local pub, I will meet people from the smartest people in society and some of the dumbest as well. But it's a place where you can share ideas and look people in the eye. And you can tell somebody, I think your idea is ridiculous, and not end up in a fight because but if you're just doing it sort of from a distance online and go, you're stupid and you're ridiculous, then that's no longer a conversation, is it?
No, not at all, not at all. And I think we've collectively become quite lazy in the way we argue. Instead of putting forward a position or being curious about the other person's position, we tend to yell at them or label them or name them. Even and I mean, and I consider myself an anti-racist, but even the title of calling somebody a racist, it's actually become a bit lazy because we're not dissecting what our differences are, what problems we have, what fears we have. We're not changing minds or anything. We are just yelling names at each other, and it's not working. And so I do think more storytelling, more empathy, more getting outside, talking to different people is. I mean, it's simple, but I think it is the antidote to a lot of the harms in the world right now.
I agree. I mean, if let's take a broad thing, if nature could give humanity one piece of feedback, what do you think it would say?
Just calm down a little bit. It's everything seen with humanity. We put everything on almost steroids. It is like hyper consumption, hyper destruction, hyper angry. We need to calm down a little.
No, no, no. I mean, I agree because here's my analogy is like if you live in a city, if you lived in Melbourne or London or a thing, and you'd wake up in the middle of the night and the car alarm outside was going off, and you'd go, "Oh my God, it's somebody's trying to break into the car and somebody's trying to do it." But all that's happened is that somebody has set the car alarm too high, and a cat has walked past and it's
Yes,
set.
yes, exactly that.
And that's what I feel. And also with the rolling 24-hour news and everything, we're all
Yeah,
set on edge constantly. And
yeah,
we're
yeah,
shouting at each other rather than listening to each other.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Or maybe you would say it's a great time to be a cockroach. I don't know.
Well, that's the bit we're going to clip, you know
Yeah.
that. Top environmentalists said it's a great time to be a cockroach. Oh, is there still time for a happy ending? I mean, I kind of don't want to end on the well, we're not ending, but on the downer of like, is
Of
there still
course.
time?
Of course. I mean, that's it's such an injustice to even consider giving up. It is such an injustice to young people, to future generations, to all of the people that are working so hard to make the world a better place. It is an injustice to them to even consider giving up. But I see really positive changes as, of course, things are bad, but it's not. It's certainly not the end. We have the rights of nature movement, which is seeking to embed the rights of nature to, exist on its own into constitutions around the world, Ecuador being the first to have the rights of nature. We're having these legal movements with kids teaming up with nuns to sue their governments over environmental inaction. We have policymakers and NGOs pushing for stronger policy. We have economists that are challenging the notion of GDP and whether that is the best measure of growth. So there is a lot of work going on, but it is a patchwork. It is all over the place, and it is. it is hard to see the progress when we are exposed to a 24-hour news cycle that is driven by fear and outrage.
Yeah, and it is quite sort of staggering how we've shifted to that position. I mean, is the antidote, and this is why it's a humorology podcast, uh, why do you think we're so drawn to people who can make us laugh? And is that, given your book, the future of change? Is seeing it from the light side?
Laughter, laughter brings us together. I think that if you can laugh with somebody, you can overcome a lot of differences. We might have different opinions, but if we've laughed together, it creates a bond. It creates a bond between two people. It creates a societal bond. Or if you're sitting in a comedy show, the audience feels bonded. It is, I think it is it's one easy thing that you can, that allows us to be closer to somebody. It's joy. Feeling joy in the company of somebody else is important. It helps you like them a bit more and connect with them a little bit more and humanize them a little bit more, I guess. And so I don't know if it's going to work, but so far, I mean, with my book has leaned on humor quite a bit, which is unusual for an environmental book, and it's been well received so far, and it's had interesting readers from people who wouldn't usually pick up a nature book are reading this book now, and so I'm taking that as positive feedback that humor can work.
I think you're right. And the other thing I would add in there is, well, I'd ask the question, does humor also aid resilience, which we all need at this time?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, humor, I think humor and laughter and hope absolutely help resilience. You get, if things get too negative, people give up. Um, I mean, I would say that the reason I have been staunchly committed to the environment and communities for my whole career, my whole life, it is, and I have not stopped. And I think a large part of that has been that I have laughed through all of it. I've felt joy through all of it, even when it was dark and even when things were tough. I have reached for people, for family who can make me laugh, or for content that can make me laugh. So yeah, I do. I really do.
Oh, well, that takes us to the part of the show that we call quick fire questions.
Quick fire questions.
Natalie, who's the funniest business person you've met?
Uh, uh, Donald Trump, but
You've met him?
no, no, sorry, been exposed to.
But, well, hold on. I think you might want to rephrase that as
No,
well.
no, I don't.
Uh, there's
Finish,
another headline
finish.
for the podcast as well.
Let's
Top
move on.
environmentalist exposed to Donald Trump.
Oh, I've already taken this in the wrong direction.
Uh, okay. What makes and I think your word talking about Donald Trump. What makes him funny, peculiar, as I'm hoping your thing, and what do you think? Because I actually have views on. I think he is strangely a brilliant communicator because you can't get 74 million people to vote for you and not have something. And I think one of the big problems is that people think he's a joke when we shouldn't be taking him as a joke because he's doing something very serious and he's doing it quite well at times.
Yes, yeah, he absolutely is. I mean, he has appealed to um, all of the fear in many people. And he has channeled something real, the real discontent that society feels. He has positioned himself as a savior, as that, and a straight talker, um, and he has amassed a huge amount of support and a really undying and unwavering support. Um, there is something there is something funny about a population that votes against their own interests, um, that sees one person as a savior. I don't, there is not one, there is nobody that I would put so much faith into. I think our political leaders should be challenged. But I mean, there is something comical about the entity that is Donald Trump, who is doing his utmost to destroy the world, and impoverish and hurt the most impoverished communities, while at the same time positioning himself as their savior. It is
Well,
remarkable.
it's cult behavior, really, isn't it? And we were talking
Yeah.
about cults earlier on.
Yeah, but also it just shows that one person can make a difference. I never really believed it, until Donald Trump, and now I know one person can make a difference. It's not quite the difference I had in mind, but
No, no, but you're right. All we need is the pendulum to swing to somebody who makes a difference for good. Um,
yeah.
what book makes you laugh?
Last Chance to See by Douglas Adams.
Oh,
Yeah, Douglas Adams, he's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy,
I
but he's
know.
written a brilliant non-fiction book about nature, and I've only just read it recently because somebody reached out and said, there's another person that wrote a nature book that is funny, and there's not many of us. So um, I read it, and it's very funny. I really really enjoyed reading it.
Well, funnily enough, a friend of mine who was also a guest on this show is John Lloyd, who did Blackadder and does QI, and he wrote some of those early books with Douglas Adams. So I'm not sure about that one, but I will ask John. We're having lunch in a couple of weeks. I'll ask John about
Oh,
that.
brilliant. Yeah,
It's,
please do.
what film makes you laugh?
Well, I choose I think I've got a TV series that
Oh,
Grace and Frankie. Have you ever seen
I'll
Grace
ask
and
the question
Frankie?
again. Wait a sec. What TV show makes you laugh?
Grace and Frankie. Have you
I
seen it?
don't know the show. What is it?
It is it's one of the few shows that I think that centers the lives and experiences of people over 70. And it is two couples, two straight couples, who are all friends, and then the two men leave their wives to be with each other. And it's this really funny journey into all of their differing relationships, and it just brings me so much joy. And it's just a show that actually makes me look forward to being 80. And there's not many shows that do that, I don't think so. And it's very very funny, and the two women, they start a sex toy company, and it is just it's great. I think it challenges a lot of societal biases and makes you laugh along the way.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to go to the other side now, and I'm going to ask you a question, which is what's not funny?
Planetary system collapse, but you can still find, I think I think you can laugh at anything and everything, given timing and given you're careful about the subject and object of the joke. But no, I don't particularly find planetary system collapse funny.
Yeah, strangely, I don't either. But but I find a warmth in the fact that you're finding a funny way to point out why planetary system collapse is not funny, which warms my heart to an extent. What word makes you laugh, Natalie?
Struth.
That's a very Australian word.
It is. It is. It's an Australian word that we use. I mean, it's not used very often, but I mean, it can replace a swear word, or it's sort of like saying, "Oh my God." Yeah, I find that word quite funny.
Oh, that's lovely. What sound makes you laugh?
What sound?
Yeah. Is it a bonobo?
Um, what sound? Oh gosh. I mean, the kakapo. The sound of a kakapo
Mating?
trying the mating call of the kakapo. The sound of the kakapo trying desperately to reproduce but failing.
That's cruel to laugh at a failing mating ritual. I didn't think you had that cruelty in you.
No, but this year is a mating boom. They're having a remarkable year. It's actually one of the few good news stories that despite the kakapo being terrible at courtship, they're having a really, really great year with lots of babies born.
Hurrah! Would you rather be considered clever or funny?
Clever, because I think being clever encompasses funny.
Oh, that's interesting. I think you're right. I don't think. Well, actually, I don't. I think they both intersect, don't they?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Either one, I think, requires the other.
I completely agree. And finally, Natalie, desert island gags. If you can only take one joke with you to a desert island, what would it be?
It's a really bad, it's an embarrassing one to take, but the only one I know is what's a fish with no eye?
I don't know.
Psh.
You see? That's the perfect environmentalist joke.
It's very embarrassing.
It's very embarrassing, but it's very, very sweet and absolutely funny. I thank you so much for being a wonderful, wonderful guest on the Humourology podcast. Natalie Kyriacou, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
The Humourology podcast was hosted by Paul Barros, produced by David Rose. Music by Steve Hayworth, creative direction by Les Hughes, and additional research by Helen Sykes. Please remember to subscribe, like, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. This has been a Big Sky production.